Welcome to Every Trait, the pro Biopunk philosophy channel. You may call me ZJ for now, and we are still in phase 1, biology and pop culture. This video will be much more on brand for the channel than the last one. So this one's about why in any cyberpunk setting, biopunks would be pretty much inevitable. If the cybernetics have only been used for like a generation, you could justify biomods not being around, genemods and graphs and things. But if they've been around for a while, there should be biopunks too. So first we're going to talk about the difficulties of getting this technology to work. So the main difficulty for cybernetics, of course, is feedback. Most cybernetics, most prosthetic limbs these days just use like muscle attachments. They don't even connect to nerves. And the cybernetics that do connect to nerves only get the data sent one way. They don't send it back to the brain generally. So that's the hard part there. When it comes to genetics and biology, there's such a thing as negative gene interactions where like one gene affects another gene and it can just cause you to die. So that's a bit of a problem. But the thing is, in every cyberpunk setting, there's much more advanced computing power. You can fit a whole human brain on like a little disk in the Cyberpunk 2077 game. So like, yeah. So at that level of technology, sure, you could predict negative gene interactions and then gene modding would suddenly be safe. So that solves that issue. Another problem is the lack of any sort of biorestructuring technology. You change someone's genes, their body doesn't change. What you are is determined when you're an embryo, pretty much. So, I mean, if you were to mod in regeneration or something, that might do it, but it's difficult. So before we can even begin to explain why biomods would be in a cyberpunk setting, we need to see if biomods are even possible. I mean, they do exist in cyberpunk settings. Like in cyberpunk, they have the degens and the exotics, and in Shadowrun, they have BioWare as an alternative to cyberware, but it's not nearly as prevalent as it should be, if you ask me. So let's solve the problem with biorestructuring. Would it ever even be possible to like change what you are? Well, yeah, changing the brain like shape would be hard. I don't even know where to begin there. Bone structure, though, if you could soften the bones up somehow, make them like more sponge-like, maybe you could change them. There's a species that metabolizes its own bone structure, although its bone structure is probably different to begin with. So I'm not sure that could be transferred to a person. But when it comes to soft tissue, there is one possibility. There's several possibilities, but I'm going to tell you about one. Hey, I'll tell you about one that came to me in a dream. So in this dream, I was going to a clinic, and it was a modding clinic. There was a big hospital on the hill that was for regular people, because the vast majority of the population, given that freedom, would choose to stay as they are and not use modding clinics. So the modding clinic wasn't covered by like universal healthcare. The one for regular people was. So it was very overcrowded, and I was going there to get some work done, and it got done way too fast. I asked the nurse how they did it, and she didn't know because she was just a nurse. So I asked the clinic director. The clinic director was a regular looking person, except he was blue. I don't know. And he said basically this. So you get stem cells and duplicate, you modify their DNA and then duplicate them, but keep them stem cells. So take them from the person. So they are that person's body. You take them from that person. Or if you could like grow skin cells and then change them, I guess you could do that too. But changing the DNA of individual cells is way easier than a whole body. And you make a bunch of them, and then you Swiss cheese the body with them. But how do the modified cells win out to change the soft tissue? I mean, yeah, they know where to grow up based on what's already there. They're using the body as its own blueprint or scaffolding. But how do they win out if they're only like 1 out of 100,000 cells or something? Well, there's a few ways. Make them susceptible to a healing or growth stimulant that regular cells are not. That would be really slow and it could have bad side effects. There's also make them able to fix a nutrient human cells can't normally fix and then deny that from the diet. But cells share nutrients with those cells, so that might not work. The scariest way is probably the most effective, which would be a necrotoxin that human cells have a hard time surviving, and somehow release it in a way that's in small enough doses and dispersed enough that instead of harming the person, it just lets the modified cells win out because they're immune, because they would be modified to be immune. whether the person was getting modded to survive a disease or whether they were getting modded to become a freak. In both cases, you would put in that immunity. And if you had two different toxins, you could switch between them. So the person could mod back and forth in multiple different ways. So anyway, I don't know how realistic that method is, but I'm just saying it might actually be possible to restructure. Maybe not using that method, that's just something that came to me in a dream. But I'm just saying, it's not as impossible as people say. So assuming that exists, we're going to compare and contrast the different advantages to cybermodding versus biomodding. And first of all, if you were to make a setting like this, how would you not have characters be both? And that's pretty easy. You could say that the biorestructuring process gives you a super immune system and then you reject all implants or something. So that would keep them separate. But first, we're going to talk about cybermods, the advantages of those. Number one, diversity of modification. You could have an arm that splits at the elbow and goes like that and be a super drummer or something. I don't know. You can do all sorts of wacky stuff. There's also machine brain interface, which is, of course, the main point of it. Full immersive VR, all of that. Can't do that with genetics. And then quick change, being able to change out parts relatively quickly. You probably need extensive physical therapy after your first thing, but then, like if your arm is artificial and you just want to change what the hand does, you probably just, I mean, not that easy, but you could probably switch stuff out pretty cheap, pretty quick. Whereas with genetics, again, I'm talking like 4 months. That's if you're doing some bone structure too. If you're not doing bone structure, maybe you could be quicker. I don't know. This is not a technology that really exists. Well, neither is feedback for cybernetics, but So what are the advantages for genetics over cybernetics? Well, the first is it's far cheaper to get high-end mods. So for cybermods, like low-end cheap ones would exist, but they wouldn't be very good. And the high-end ones could cost billions. Whereas with gemods, the high-end ones and the low-end ones are the same cost. There would really only be 3 costs: changing only soft tissue, changing bone structure too, and then if you're trying to change the brain, I don't even know how you begin to do that. And then grafting a tail or something. So that would be 4, I guess. 4 different costs. The base cost and then 3 potential additive costs. But you could still get the highest end of any of those things you're doing for the same price as the lower end ones. Whereas with cybernetics, the high-end ones are very expensive. The second advantage for Gmod over Cybermod is, again, cost of maintenance in this case. What do you need to do to maintain your mods? Drink, eat, get plenty of sleep, exercise. What about cybernetics? Well, if something breaks, you need a very special, expensive component to replace it. So, I mean, yeah, you need medical care for biology, but regular people need that too. Cybermods need that too because they still have some organic parts. So, yeah, Gmodding is much more easy to maintain. And one of the reasons it would be cheaper to mod is because you could put one person after another, after another, after another through the same system using the same equipment. Whereas with cybermods, you're having to buy more stuff for each person, more specialized components for each person and each part. So if you average it out over a long period of time, a biomodding clinic could be way cheaper in the long run, even though some of the equipment would be pretty expensive to start up. Because of this, it would also be easier to do it underground. And the biggest advantage to Gmodding would be no added vulnerabilities. So cybermodding and Gmodding are both trade-offs, right? When you cybermod, you become vulnerable to hacking, jamming, EMPs, real-time video editing, all the things that only affect machines but don't affect organic things. Wouldn't affect Gmods either. The trade-off for Gmods is more direct. For example, digitigrade legs over plantigrade legs. Yeah, you'd be able to sprint a lot faster, but you'd never run a marathon. It's a trade-off. It's not really augmentation, which is why I sound so calm talking about it and most people freak out about it. I understand it's a trade-off. So with this in mind, why would you ever mod if it's a trade-off in both cases? Well, if you care more about what you're gaining than what you're losing, then it's a win. For cyber running, for example, having legs let you sprint faster is way more important than being able to run a marathon. And for some people being able to do full immersive VR with a machine brain interface, that matters more to them than being immune to EMPs. So it's all about a trade-off. And yes, given this freedom, the vast majority of people would not use it. They would choose to stay as they are. But we're not talking about them. We're talking about the characters in a cyberpunk story, right? So now we're going to go over, would genemods even be accepted in a cyberpunk setting? And I think the answer is yes. Because cybermods could be so much wackier than genemods. Like the weirdest thing you could get with genemods would be something like maybe the fish dude from Shape of Water, or maybe a Khajiit from Elder Scrolls. Whereas the weirdest thing you can get from cybermod is really far out there. Like I said, you could break the basic body plan. You could have an arm that splits, or you could have, like if you had a tail, it could light up. It could have different colors to it. It could have like LEDs. It could have a tip on the end that spins like a drill. You could do whatever. Whereas with genemods, if you had a genemod tail, it's just a tail. It's boring by comparison. So if people get used to cybermods and they see a genemod walking around, they might not even know that's what it is. They might think it's someone with cybernetics that are themed to look like that. They might not even know. So yeah, they probably would be accepted. Now to really drive home the point, I'm going to tell you a story. So in this story, we have a company that makes cybernetic eyes. They're the main makers of those for the planet, okay? There were some soldiers that were tricked by it with real-time video editing, making innocent people look like enemies holding guns, and so they would shoot them because the company wanted those people gone. And regular people who had eyes from that company also had any like bad comments about the company edited out of their view because of real-time video editing. So they actually weren't able to see anything negative about the company. And eventually this was figured out and people got pissed. And one of the board members also got pissed because he didn't know about it. So they kicked him off the board. And he left a little secret on his way out. The boards since then have been meeting in person. They met virtually, which is how the information got leaked. And these cyberpunks are very angry that their very perception was messed with. And yes, this was stolen from a Black Mirror episode. But, you know, the thing about the soldiers and the, yeah. Fast forward to the next board meeting, and everything's normal around the building where it's happening. Everything's calm. And then suddenly, out of thin air, appears a bunch of people wearing weird robes with this weird pattern on, working with these big machines that have weird patterns on them that they've clamped into the ground. And the security gets alerted, and the turrets and the automated security is ignoring them. So the human security, they start shooting, and the bullets pass right through them, like it's clipping in a game. It just passes right through. And then they activate the devices they're working on, and everyone in the area bowls over in pain, like, everyone. And then the cloaked figures flow towards the main building. Some of them use explosives and things. They enter on all different floors. They get in, they activated some EMPs they're carrying inside the building. The building's shielded from them externally, and they didn't want to hurt the people outside with that. They want to just cause them pain and not actually harm them. So they do this. A lot of the modded people in the building are taken out right away. They throw off the cloaks. A lot of them are genemods, which is why they weren't affected. A lot of them have what I call the HKSR mod, which is Hunter, Killer, Search, and Rescue. It's mobility and senses, you know. So with a lot of genemods, you'll see animal themes and things like that, because what other DNA is there to pull from, really, you know. So yeah, they look like that. In comic books, they would, of course, fight with their claws. So the people assume that's what they're going to do. They fall back, they form choke points, and one of the mods puts a grenade launcher around the corner. And why would they use their claws? That's stupid. Of course they're going to use human weapons. They got human brains. Okay, so they dominate. They completely clear out the building. The boardroom is sealed up. They drill a hole in it and start pumping a gas into it. They all put their gas masks on, but it's not actually a poisonous gas. It's a plastivorous bacteria. It starts eating away at the coating around wires. It starts eating away at all the plastic. And to prevent people from being permanently sealed in the panic room, when this starts to happen, when it starts to short out and everything, the doors just automatically open. And then they capture the board. So why aren't there reinforcements? Well, that's what the cyberpunks were doing. They were out on outside of all these effects, keeping that from happening, keeping any reinforcements from entering. Because they were the ones who were actually wronged, not the genepunks. So why are they working together? Well, why wouldn't they? They both believe that a soul owns its body. They both believe in self-expression. They both believe they're not the property of their ancestors. They're just using different tools to express it. I know I was comparing and contrasting them earlier, but there's no real reason they'd be enemies. So what actually happened here? How did they appear? Well, that was the secret that the board member that was disgraced left behind. More real-time video editing, editing out a specific pattern, the pattern on the devices and the cloaks. An organic brain could still see around it a little bit, but it was displaced, so they were shooting in the wrong place. That's why the bullets seemed to be clipping through. As for the devices they activated, broad spectrum jammers, all wireless connections in the person's body overloaded at once, which caused pain and disorientation and caused them to bowl over in pain. Of course, it didn't affect the genepunks. So do you see are you picking up what I'm putting down here? There are weapons you could design that only hurt cyberpunks, that do not hurt regular people or genepunks, or biopunks. I mean, biopunk is a more accepted term, I guess. And it covers a broader range of things, like graphs and stuff. So, yeah, there are weapons you could design that specifically hurt cyberpunks, but no one else. But if you design a weapon to hurt organics, that hurts regular people. It hurts genemods. And it also hurts cybermods, because cybermods have organic components. So it only works one way. You can make weapons that specifically target cybermods, but you cannot make weapons that specifically only target genemods. You could make drones designed to only attack certain types of people. That's about the only thing you could do. So in a setting like this, what would be the perfect like 6-person party? Well, let's see. The face of the party would probably be a default person, not modified, because there's a lot of people who don't want to talk to mods, don't want to interact with them, and they would need to be the face to avoid that prejudice. Probably the driver would also be a regular person, because they're going to have to talk their way through checkpoints and things like that. Even though they're not the face of the party, you probably need your pilot/driver to be a regular person. Your hacker, cybermod for sure. And the other 3 members of the party, genemod. Your stealth one, modified for nothing but that. Your attacker, an HKSR. And your, maybe like a tanky one, or if you're in a coastal city, maybe an aquatic one or something. But that would actually be the party loadout. The thesis of this is that if you're going to write a cyberpunk setting, don't forget the genemods, don't forget the biopunks, because in any world where cybernetics are rampant, they would show up sooner or later. Now, I'm sure the corporations would want everyone to be cyberpunks, not genemods, because they can charge for the components that they're selling, whereas with genemods, there's no real way to force people to pay a specific company for it. Because like I said, it would be pretty easy to do from underground labs. So, yeah. That might stave off biopunks for a while. Just the fact that corporate power is pretty much arrayed against them. But the whole point of a punk setting is to be a punk, to not go with the norm, to not go with the flow, to actually be a rebel. And there's nothing more rebellious than changing your nature. So anyway, that's it. Thank you for listening to this weird rant. I have been ZJ. And remember, always Gmod responsibly. Clicky, 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 clicky.